Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a battle-hardened Marine inherits a quiet home on the edge of suburbia, he expects peace until an entitled HOA president tries to force him under her control. What starts as petty harassment erupts into arson, betrayal, and a showdown no one saw coming. This is a war she never should have started. Alex had always been a man of principle. After serving 10 years in the Marine Corps, including 2 tours overseas, he longed for peace and a place to call home. That peace finally came when he inherited his parents' old house, a modest but well-built property on the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood in Florida. The house wasn't part of any HOA, a fact Alex appreciated more than most. He valued independence, and the last thing he needed was someone telling him how to mow his lawn or what time to park his vehicle. The house stood next to a high-end residential community governed by an aggressive HOA, Oak Ridge Commons. For years, Alex lived in relative harmony with them. The previous HOA president, a quiet man named Mr. Whitaker, had never bothered Alex. He understood that Alex's property was outside of their jurisdiction, and the two shared a mutual respect, occasionally exchanging nods or small talk over the fence. That changed 6 months ago. Whitaker stepped down, and his replacement came in like a hurricane. Her name was Karen Montgomery, a woman in her early 50s with sharp features, a condescending tone, and an unrelenting obsession with order. From the moment she took over as HOA president, Karen fixated on Alex like a personal project. To her, a non-member living next to her community was a threat to uniformity. She began pushing hard to force Alex into joining the HOA. Alex didn't budge. He knew the law, and he knew his property lines. Besides, he had no intention of paying monthly fees or abiding by rules designed for houses he didn't own. He lived his life simply, working as a private security consultant by day and riding his powerful, custom-built Harley-Davidson to work every morning. The rumble of his engine echoed down the block at sunrise, a sound that made Karen fume. It didn't take long before tensions started to rise. Karen's campaign began under the guise of politeness. She showed up at Alex's door one morning with a fake smile and a neatly bound welcome packet. Dressed in a powder blue blazer and armed with a clipboard, she introduced herself and extended a hand he didn't take. "I just wanted to formally invite you to join Oak Ridge Commons," she said, as if it were a country club. "We pride ourselves on community standards, and since your property is adjacent, it only makes sense you become part of the family." Alex crossed his arms, unimpressed. "I'm not interested. My property isn't part of your HOA, and I intend to keep it that way." Karen's smile twitched. "Well, perhaps you should reconsider. The community has certain expectations. That motorcycle of yours, so loud in the mornings, it's been the subject of, concerns." Alex didn't flinch. "I'm not breaking any noise ordinances, and I'm not joining your HOA. Have a nice day." He shut the door, but Karen didn't go away. Within days, she was back, this time with a printed letter warning Alex about unapproved exterior modifications to his property, citing his choice of mailbox design and the military-style decals on his garage. She claimed they clashed with the aesthetic vision of Oak Ridge Commons. The letter ended with a demand to remedy the violations within 10 business days. Alex laughed as he tossed it in the trash. Then came the complaints. She filed a noise grievance with the city about his morning departures, sent an anonymous tip to the environmental department claiming his vehicle emissions were polluting community air, and even flagged his property on a neighborhood watch form for questionable behavior. Each time, Alex dealt with it calmly, meeting officers or inspectors at his gate, showing them his clean records, and watching their puzzled expressions when they realized the reports were baseless. One afternoon, he caught her snapping photos of his backyard from the sidewalk. When he stepped out and asked what she was doing, she didn't even flinch. "Collecting documentation," she said coolly. "Your lack of landscaping maintenance is hurting nearby home values." That was rich, considering his yard was immaculate. But Karen didn't care about facts. She cared about control. Alex knew this wasn't about noise or appearances. It was about power. She couldn't stand that someone next door lived by their own rules, untouched by her authority, and the harder she pushed, the more defiant he became. It was a Wednesday morning, the sky still dark with a hint of dawn peeking through. The air was crisp, and the low rumble of Alex's Harley echoed through the cul-de-sac. as he rolled it out of his garage, helmet clipped, leather jacket zipped. He was halfway down his driveway when two figures stepped into his path, both wearing dark security jackets with Oak Ridge Commons Security printed in yellow across the chest. Alex braked sharply. His eyes narrowed. The two men weren't familiar. Likely new hires Karen had brought in. One was broad and heavy-set with a shaved head, the other wiry but tall, his stance too aggressive to mistake for anything casual. "Morning," Alex said flatly. "You gentlemen lost?" The heavier one stepped forward. "We need to have a word with you." Alex glanced at his watch. "You've got 30 seconds. "You think it's okay to talk to a lady like that?" The wiry one snapped, arms crossed over his chest. "We heard what you said to Mrs. Montgomery." Alex raised an eyebrow. "You mean when I told her to stop trespassing and harassing me?" "Yeah, I remember. Is that what this is about?" The heavier guard sneered. "You need to show some respect. Karen's the president of this community. You live next door. You need to learn how to behave." Alex sighed, reaching for his phone in his jacket pocket. "What I need is for you both to get off my property before I call the police and report you for harassment and attempted intimidation." That did it. The tall one lunged first, grabbing at Alex's arm in what was clearly an attempt to restrain him. But Alex moved with the precision of a man trained for far worse. In a swift motion, he stepped back, twisted the attacker's wrist, and spun him around, locking his arm behind his back in a painful hold. The man gasped and dropped to one knee. Before the other could react, Alex pushed the first man away and pivoted toward the heavy-set one. "You want to try too?" he asked coldly. The second man hesitated, but the flash of uncertainty in his eyes betrayed the fact that he'd underestimated his opponent. Alex took a step forward, and with a sharp front kick, sent him stumbling backward into the curb. The man let out a grunt and fell on his backside. Alex stood over them, his voice calm but laced with fury. "I fought men with rifles and explosives. You think two HOA mall cops are going to scare me off my own driveway? You come near me again, I'll have you arrested. And if you lay another hand on me, you'll be explaining it to a judge, with a lawsuit hanging over your heads." The two men scrambled to their feet, humiliated, glaring, but saying nothing. They retreated toward Oak Ridge Commons, nursing their bruised pride. Alex exhaled slowly, forcing the adrenaline down. He mounted his Harley, started the engine, and pulled out into the street. But even as the roar of the motor swallowed the silence, he knew this wasn't over. This was just a warning shot. And next time, they wouldn't come empty-handed. That evening, after returning from work, Alex didn't waste time. He called his attorney, Lisa Granger, a sharp, no-nonsense woman he'd worked with before, on a property rights case involving a neighbor's encroaching fence. She listened calmly as he described the morning's confrontation in detail, her tone remaining measured as always, but Alex could sense the undercurrent of concern. "They put hands on you?" she asked. "Yeah, one of them tried to twist my arm behind my back. Didn't go well for him." Lisa let out a short breath. "Good. But this is escalation, Alex. They're testing boundaries now. You need to protect yourself legally before this spirals into something worse." "I want a restraining order," he said. "Karen and her muscle need to stay away from my house." Lisa agreed, but advised caution. A restraining order required a documented pattern of harassment or physical threat. While the morning's attack was serious, it was also isolated, for now. "Start building a paper trail," she said. "Install security cameras, hidden, motion-activated, high-res. Get coverage of your entire property, especially the garage, driveway, and fence line. If they try anything again, you'll have proof." Alex nodded. That was something he could handle. The next day, he drove to a tech supplier in town and picked up a full suite of surveillance gear. Infrared night vision cameras, wireless motion sensors, a backup power supply, and a cloud storage subscription. He spent the evening installing them with military precision. One above the garage door, another hidden in a birdhouse near the side fence, a third angled from a tree branch overlooking the backyard, and two more along the driveway, discreet but effective. He tested every angle, made sure the footage streamed directly to both his phone and encrypted cloud storage, and even added tamper alerts. By midnight, the system was live. He also updated his home's alarm system, reinforcing the back door and garage entrance with reinforced locks. If anyone came poking around again, they'd trigger more than just video footage. Lisa filed a preliminary incident report with local authorities and began drafting documents in case a restraining order was needed on short notice. In the meantime, Alex documented everything. He saved screenshots, time-stamped interactions, and even began keeping a log of strange cars near his house. There was no paranoia, just preparation. He knew how people like Karen operated: escalate until they feel powerful, and then escalate more when they feel challenged. She'd tried to send a message through her guards. Alex was ready to send one back. 3 nights later, the silence was broken. It was just after 3 a.m. when Alex jolted awake, the piercing screech of his smoke alarm slicing through the stillness of his bedroom. For a split second, he thought it was a false trigger, maybe a power surge, a dead battery. But then came the smell, the unmistakable acrid sting of smoke. He was out of bed in an instant, grabbing the pistol from his nightstand as he moved. His heart pounded with trained urgency, his mind already scanning threats. The smoke was thickest near the back of the house. He sprinted barefoot through the hallway, past the kitchen, and threw open the door to the attached garage. Flames. His custom-built Harley was engulfed in fire, the polished chrome melting into a pool of orange and black. The garage, though reinforced, was rapidly filling with smoke. Paint blistered on the walls. The heat was searing, forcing him to retreat. Alex slammed the door shut and hit the emergency switch on the alarm panel. Within seconds, the house lights pulsed red and the security system dialed out. As the siren wailed into the night, he grabbed his fire extinguisher and rushed to the front yard to open the main garage door from outside, hoping to slow the spread. The fire department arrived minutes later, the flashing red trucks bathing the street in chaos. Neighbors trickled out of their homes, blinking in the confusion, clutching robes and phones. Some were wide-eyed, others strangely passive. Alex stood in the front yard, fists clenched, smoke smudging his jaw, watching firefighters battle to contain the blaze. By dawn, the fire was out. The garage was blackened and scorched. The Harley, his pride, his freedom, was a twisted ruin. But the house was intact. No one was hurt, and now it was time for answers. He pulled out his phone, hands still trembling, and opened the security app. His breath caught as the footage loaded. There, time-stamped at 2:41 a.m., 2 figures climbed over his side fence, flashlights off, moving low. One carried a gas can. The other pried open the garage's side panel with practiced ease. Then a third figure entered frame, Karen. Her posture was unmistakable, upright, directing, arms crossed as the 2 men went to work. They splashed fuel, lit the fire, and disappeared into the shadows. Karen lingered longer than the others, watching the first embers bloom before calmly slipping away toward the Oak Ridge Commons gate. Alex stared at the footage in silence. His jaw tightened. This wasn't harassment anymore. It was attempted arson, and someone could have died. Now, it was war. By noon that same day, Alex had already visited the police department. Digital copies of the footage loaded on a flash drive, and cloud links prepped for evidence submission. He sat across from a detective named Brian Callahan, stoic, gray-haired, the kind of man who had seen every shade of human stupidity, and watched as the video played on the monitor in front of them. When Karen's face appeared in the grainy night footage, Callahan froze the frame. He leaned forward, narrowed his eyes, and quietly muttered, "Well, hell." Within an hour, officers were dispatched to Oak Ridge Commons. Alex returned home to find 2 squad cars parked at the entrance to the gated neighborhood, while a third patrolled the perimeter. It didn't take long. The 2 security guards, identified as Darren Knox and Luis Mercado, were pulled from their modest homes inside the community without resistance. Karen, however, caused a scene. She emerged from her front porch in a pink tracksuit, holding a smoothie, feigning confusion. "What is this? I demand to know what's going on." Callahan himself stepped up. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, reckless endangerment, trespassing, and attempted destruction of private property. You have the right to remain silent." Her expression dropped like a stone. "I don't understand," she stammered. "This must be a mistake. I didn't do anything. This is a vendetta." But Callahan didn't flinch. "We have you on camera, Mrs. Montgomery, directing 2 men as they set a man's property on fire. You nearly set his house ablaze. You could have killed someone." As they cuffed her, neighbors gathered in stunned silence. Some whispered, others recorded on their phones. One elderly man shook his head slowly and said, "I always knew she'd go too far." The arrests made headlines the next morning. Local news stations ran segments with stills from the footage, interviewing nearby residents and even Lisa Granger, who by now had filed an emergency civil suit on Alex's behalf. Karen's mugshot was plastered across screens, her haughty face pale and stunned. The two security guards confessed quickly under pressure, hoping for lighter sentences. In their statements, they admitted that Karen orchestrated the entire thing. She had promised them discretionary bonuses through HOA funds if they helped scare off the nuisance biker next door. Neither realized they were being filmed or that the fire would spread so quickly. Karen's response, once she realized how deep she was in, turned desperate. She claimed Alex provoked her, that she was trying to protect the community, and that she hadn't intended any harm. But the footage told another story of calculation, of control, of a woman enraged by someone she couldn't dominate. The judge denied bail. All three were ordered to remain in custody until the criminal trial. Alex, for the first time in weeks, sat on his front porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise with no fear. His Harley was gone, but his peace wasn't. Not anymore. And justice had only just begun. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Local reporters filled the benches, their cameras waiting outside the courthouse steps. Residents of Oak Ridge Commons attended in quiet clusters, some out of morbid curiosity, others with hope that their long-standing grievances against Karen Montgomery would finally come to light. Alex entered in a crisp gray suit, jaw set, posture straight. He didn't want revenge. He wanted accountability. The prosecution presented its case methodically. Video evidence played on the projector for all to see. Clear footage of Darren and Luis sneaking onto Alex's property, carrying gasoline, prying open his garage, and setting his beloved motorcycle ablaze. Karen, unmistakably visible, supervised the entire act like a general overseeing a battlefield. Gasps rippled through the room as her face filled the screen. She didn't look up from the defendant's table. Testimonies followed. The arson investigator explained how close the fire came to igniting the main gas line, how Alex's life, and potentially the lives of nearby neighbors, had been put at serious risk. Police officers testified about the arrest and how one of the security guards admitted under questioning that Karen orchestrated the act. Then came the HOA treasurer, called as a surprise witness, who testified under oath that Karen had been embezzling funds from the association for years, including the money she promised to the guards as a bonus. Karen's attorney tried to reframe her as a community leader, driven to desperation by an uncooperative and disruptive neighbor. They cited noise complaints, claimed emotional distress, and accused Alex of provoking her over time. But the jury didn't buy it, especially not after Alex took the stand himself. He testified with calm conviction, describing the months of harassment, the threats, the ambush by the guards, and the night of the fire. He never raised his voice, never dramatized. He simply spoke the truth about waking up to flames, about losing the motorcycle he'd built with his father, and about the danger her actions brought to his home. The verdict came quickly. All three were found guilty, Darren and Luis, of felony arson, reckless endangerment, and criminal conspiracy. Karen was convicted on all counts, including conspiracy to commit arson, attempted destruction of property, and criminal solicitation. The judge, a stern woman with no tolerance for petty tyrants, sentenced Karen to 20 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 12. Darren and Luis each received 10. In the civil trial that followed, the jury awarded Alex $1.2 million in damages, property loss, emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive compensation. Karen's assets, including her Oak Ridge townhouse and a vacation home in Naples, were seized to begin paying the judgment. The message was clear, not just to Karen, but to anyone watching. You don't burn someone's life down and walk away. Not in this town, not on Alex's watch. Months passed, and the neighborhood slowly settled back into something resembling normalcy, though for many, things would never be quite the same. The charred remnants of Alex's garage were long cleared away, replaced with a new structure that gleamed with fresh steel and reinforced concrete. Inside sat a brand new Harley-Davidson Road Glide, custom finished in matte black with deep crimson accents. On the wall above it, mounted like a badge of honor, was a scorched license plate, the only salvageable piece from the original bike. Etched beneath it, "What doesn't burn stands stronger." Alex had used a portion of the civil payout to not only rebuild, but upgrade. His home now featured an enhanced security system, solar backup grid, and new perimeter fencing. But he hadn't locked himself away. Far from it. He'd become something of a local figure. Neighbors who once waved out of politeness now stopped to chat. thank him, even apologize. A few quietly admitted they'd long been intimidated by Karen, but never had the nerve to confront her. One elderly couple brought him homemade pies every other weekend. He wasn't looking for gratitude, but the respect that he'd earned. Oak Ridge Commons, too, had undergone a transformation. With Karen gone, the HOA board faced intense scrutiny. A full audit revealed years of mismanagement, intimidation, and frivolous fines. Residents voted to dissolve the old board entirely. In its place rose a new resident-elected committee, transparent, cooperative, and far less authoritarian. Some of Karen's former supporters tried to maintain the old ways, but the tide had turned. Her downfall had become a cautionary tale, and her name a quiet embarrassment whispered at barbecues and garden clubs. Her house was auctioned and bought by a young family who promptly took down the HOA security booth and repurposed the space into a community library box. As for Alex, he returned to his routines, but with more peace than before. Every morning, at exactly 6:30 a.m., the deep thunder of his new Harley echoed proudly down the street. And this time, no one complained. He still met with Lisa Granger occasionally. They became good friends through the ordeal. She joked once that his case would make for a great legal podcast episode. He laughed but didn't disagree. The case had drawn national attention for a time, appearing on legal blogs and homeowner forums. Messages poured in from people in similar battles, thanking him for standing his ground. One evening, as the Florida sun dipped low and cast long golden rays across his porch, Alex leaned back with a glass of whiskey and watched the light play off the chrome of his bike. The fire, the fear, the fury, it was all behind him now. What remained was a home reclaimed, a life defended, and a future free of petty tyrants. Justice hadn't just been served, it had roared like the engine of a Harley at dawn.